Okay, so here I am with Tori Wilson. Welcome, Tori.
Thank you so much, Trish.
Um, so you've been doing a lot of research and serious study about post-traumatic informed, you know, studies and learning. Is that
hmm
right? I'm just going to ask you, Tori, to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your studies. You'll probably explain it much better than I will.
Sure,
Just before we start the interview, tell us a little bit about yourself.
sure. Um, my name is Tori, and I'm very close to finishing my PhD in trauma-informed English language teaching to adults. And I've done a study with participants from 3 universities in Southeast Queensland. Really because I started teaching students from a diverse range of countries a few years ago, and some of them did have or seem to have PTSD or similar. And I thought, well, what can I do to make sure that I don't exacerbate their PTSD responses? And I didn't find all that much great information, and no information really from the student's point of view. So that led to the PhD, which I started in 2016, and I'll finish very soon.
That sounds fantastic. And I imagine you're finding that people are becoming more and more interested in this area now that we're at the end of a pandemic and there is so much perhaps post-traumatic stress around in our students in
Yeah,
particular.
yeah. To be honest, there's been a lot of interest from different teaching organizations from the start, just because there isn't that much information
Mm,
around it. It's more geared toward children, most of the research and information. But you're right, there's a lot going on for people. And I just read today of a teacher who said that they were back in the classroom and one of the students disclosed that their spouse had died of COVID. So yeah, there would be a lot of trauma around the current situation for sure.
okay. All right. Well, let's dig in a little deeper. Tell me, Tori, a lot of people, I think, believe that trauma-informed TESOL is more about teaching refugees. Is this true?
Yeah, people absolutely, that's the first thing they think of. But well, obviously the refugee process involves a lot of trauma, and refugees are more um, have a higher incidence of PTSD. However, there's a lot of trauma just generally in the Australian population. For example, it's about 12% of the population will have PTSD. In my study, I interviewed international students as well as some former refugees, and there was some very high trauma amongst the international students. They came from a real range of countries, and of course, trauma can come from a range of situations. It's not just war or terrorism. It could be personal violence and abuse,
Mm,
the natural
mm.
disasters. There's just, unfortunately, there are a lot of people endure traumatic events. So we can't
So
just say
for,
it's a refugee issue.
yeah, absolutely. So for students who don't disclose information of what
Hmm.
they're going through, how, as teachers in particular, how do teachers, know if students are experiencing post-traumatic stress? Are there any particular signs to look out for?
Yeah, very good question. The short answer is that we don't know, and
Yeah.
we can't assume. I know that some of the students I've taught who were the most outgoing and class clown um, later told me that they were experiencing a lot of distress related to their past. And it's important not to assume, because I've known teachers I've worked with who have said disparaging things about students, or they're not interested, or they're too arrogant, or they don't want to learn, or they don't want to come. But when you dig deeper and you just ask the student, are you okay? Is there anything I can help you with? they often will disclose the reason why they might not be coming to class or the reason they are distracted. So yeah, it can manifest in a whole lot of different ways, especially across cultures. I would just say, assume that there's at least somebody in your class who's experiencing trauma, and teach in a trauma-informed way, because
Yeah.
it's better for everybody,
Yeah,
in
that's very good
fact.
advice. And I suppose the next step then is, if teachers discover that somebody is suffering, what's their responsibility? What is the
Mm.
responsibility of an ESL teacher, for example?
Well, I think obviously I'm not saying that we should be psychologists or medical professionals, and we do have to ask them if they want to be taken to support services for an appointment, or this kind of thing. But on the other hand, we can't just say, well, this is only the responsibility of doctors and psychiatrists, and there's nothing that we can do. That's not true. A lot of PTSD can depend on the social environment, and that includes the learning environment. So by creating a really safe and welcoming learning environment, that's actually going to do a lot to mitigate post-traumatic stress responses, or exacerbate it if it's not that kind of environment.
Yeah. And I know a lot of teachers, all teachers really do that, but I suppose it's important to keep it in mind, just to constantly create this safe environment, whether it's online or face to face. That's
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 right.
pretty powerful, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, I found that when I started getting really into the research, that, and even when I started to interview the participants, that the things that they really valued, a lot of them I was already doing, and I'm sure that a lot of ESL and EFL teachers are already doing them. But it was just, it was very validating and reassuring to know that,
Mm,
okay, what I think is the right thing actually is the right thing to do.
yeah. So how does, and I know you've done a lot of this in your studies, how does trauma and PTSD affect learning?
There are quite a lot of scientific studies that show um, post-traumatic stress affects memory. And so obviously when you're learning a language, the short-term memory plays a big role in that. It can also affect the ability to organize information logically. Um, it can affect concentration, especially if a student is experiencing flashbacks. Well, the brain basically goes into fight or flight, so no learning can take place under those circumstances. It can also impede the ability to plan for the future, or even think about the future.
Mm,
And it affects verbal learning. So, and the higher the cumulative load of PTSD, the slower language acquisition is going to be. And so it's important for us to really provide that low stress environment again, so that students can just focus on their learning.
yeah. And I suppose in and out of the classroom, all
Mm,
of these
mm,
effects are
mm.
taking place.
Yeah.
So in all of your, can you share perhaps something that you found particularly interesting,
Mm,
that you discovered in your PhD research in relation to what exactly teachers can do to
mm.
teach in a trauma-informed way?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've mentioned, creating a safe environment
Mm,
and, low stress.
mm,
What
mm.
else?
Well, yeah, I was interested in knowing how students perceived that, what they perceived as a safe environment. Um, so there were so many things, but one thing that came up was that real personal engagement with students, and to really to even read their body language, and to know when they were feeling unwell or unhappy or not understanding something. Because in a lot of cultures, students are taught not to ask for support from, especially from
Mm,
perhaps an authority figure like a teacher. So yeah, that really close engagement, because sometimes students don't even know the question to ask. If it's about a language problem, some of them said to me, yeah, I don't even know what the question is, but the good teachers, they gave me the words to ask for it. Whereas the ones who, they described some teachers who were a bit more detached from the students, and so they didn't pick up on those nonverbal cues. And if the students couldn't articulate exactly what they wanted, then the teachers couldn't pick up on it, and the students felt too discouraged to even try, and so they'd seek information elsewhere and become a bit more detached from that class, unfortunately.
So when I put my teacher hat on and listening to everything you're saying now, I find that you're simplifying it in quite a beautiful way, just to make it less scary for the teacher or for somebody, you know, like me, who hasn't done any research or study in this area. And when I hear, you know, of trauma and PTSD and in this type of learning environment, I think, oh my God, sure, I'm not, you know,
Yeah.
but the things that you're saying make so much sense, and they're quite doable, really. And to acknowledge that we're not experts, but there are little things that we can
Oh,
do.
that's right. And there's so many things that are just normal in good ESL pedagogy, like the pair work and that supportive environment, and making students feel like it's okay if they make a mistake, or if they mispronounce a word, or if they're a bit slow to catch on to something. That patience and understanding really goes a long way for making students feel relaxed. And it's really important to have that egalitarian relationship with students, because unfortunately some of my participants talked about some teachers who really treated them like children, and that obviously was not conducive to learning, and made them kind of turn off,
Yeah.
whether even if they were motivated. If you're being yelled at or something, obviously that's a barrier to learning.
So when we think of this, you know, trying to create a good trauma-informed environment, does the syllabus matter, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Some things that the participants in the research told me was familiar topics make a really big difference, because that way they're not having to learn content and the language to go with it. They already know the content and they feel confident about it.
Mm.
And then they can it's just a matter of learning the language to talk about it. It's also more engaging when it's a familiar topic rather than something abstract. And culture is really, really important. So whether it's culture in the texts, or whether the students or the teachers are getting the students to connect it to their own cultural experience, that was a very, very big theme. Students really want that culture in the syllabus, not just to talk about their own cultures, but to exchange culture with their classmates as a way to understand each other better. So it goes beyond that instrumental learning of just, well, these are the technical aspects of English and how to use it. They really wanted to get something more, and it seemed like they got it was really transformational, that sharing of culture with their classmates and teachers.
Yeah. And I guess even if teachers are trudging through, you know, a heavy academic syllabus, to introduce quite familiar topics in, you
That's
know,
right.
just separate, even, you know, warmers or activities is quite important as well, to
That's
reduce
right.
that stress.
Yeah. A lot of the textbooks that I've used do that really well. The ones that are theme based and have topics of general interest, those are the ones that students respond to.
Yeah.
Um, absolutely. Whereas if it's just based on skills or something very dry, it's going to be less engaging for the
Yeah.
students.
Well,
Mm.
well, we've spoken about, you know, what teachers can do in the classroom,
Mm.
because they're really at the front face um, of the students.
Mm.
So lastly, what I would like to ask you about is our institutional support. And and what about the institutional support, and how do you think ELICA centres and universities, what can they do to provide trauma-informed environments for staff and teachers?
Well, yeah, quite a lot of things came up in that aspect. One of the key ones was the class sizes, and obviously in Australia we do have to have 18 students or at the most, and students really noted how that was really important, and that ties back to getting that really personal engagement from the teachers. They can do that if they've got a smaller class. Also, approachability of managers, extracurricular activities were really important, that seemed to provide so much support for students, because they not only got to practice English during those extracurricular activities, but it stopped them from being lonely, especially for international students. They could meet people, and it was a really low threat engagement, and it kept them busy. And one of the universities that I worked with, that was one of their stated aims, actually, by management, that they wanted to keep the international students really, really busy so that they wouldn't have time to feel lonely or depressed. And that seemed to be very much reflected by what the students told me. Also, just having a safety system on campus, like, for example, safety buses and security staff at night, that all help to make the students feel safer. Absolutely.
So there's that feeling of being safe again that comes up, so in the classroom, outside of the classroom, just in the environment around their school or university. It's so important, isn't it?
It is not just physically safe, but emotionally safe. And I was surprised at the range of different things that made some of the participants feel safe. They said things like, well, some of them even said, well, my classmates correcting me makes me feel safe. I said, how does that make you feel safe? Well, because I know that they care about me improving my English. And likewise, teachers correcting them, as long as they did it in a nice way and a supportive way. Yeah, they felt like people had their interests at heart.
That's lovely.
Yeah. Just that support, a supportive environment really went so far. And quite a few talked about teachers who would say, well, do you have something to do on the weekends, and how are you settling in, and gave them suggestions for activities. And even during COVID, one student told about the teacher offering to buy rice, because this person couldn't buy rice, which was their staple food. And in the end, they didn't need rice from the teacher, but he said that just that offer was just overwhelming, and that care that teachers showed beyond their role of teaching English really made a big difference to feelings of belonging and connectedness with where they were studying. And as quite a few of them said, when they didn't have to worry about anything in the classroom, it just gave them the freedom to just be able to learn and not worry about anything else.
And it's also, providing that lovely environment for students to look forward to coming back into, on a Monday or whenever they start studying again.
Yeah.
Well, Tori, you have so many interesting and important things to say. I would love to talk to you for much, much longer.
Thank you.
But we will end it there. And I know the English Australian Mental Health SIG have a Facebook page, and you've posted quite a few of your blogs and interesting articles and things that you've written on that. So if anybody would like to go to that and have a look, it's
and that's where I met you, Trish, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great
good group.
Community of practice there.
And
we're also going to have a symposium in August that we've advertised on the Facebook page and in LinkedIn as well. And Tori, you will hopefully be speaking at symposium. So I'm sure that people will get a taste of all of those things you have to say now, and you'll probably go into much more detail at the symposium. So I'm really looking forward to
Thank
hearing you speak
you.
at that. That would be
Thank you. It
fantastic.
was great to speak to you, Trish.
And the best of luck finishing that PhD.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.